Hello there. I just want to make a very short video, and I mean it this time, about two tweets that I saw that were tweeted on the 29th, that's just yesterday, isn't it? By an account on Twitter, and the lady's name is Angela, and it's at Angela MM123. I'll copy and paste the tweets in the information bar. But it's an absolute killer argument that I've not seen until I saw these tweets yesterday. An absolute killer argument that the defence should have used but didn't in relation to the so-called smoking gun insulin cases. And I'll just read the two tweets that Angela wrote here. She says, the first one is, "The thing that confuses me about the prosecution's arguments on the insulin is that he said it had to be Lucy because she was there when they believe a baby's F and L were poisoned, so she's on shift. But he also argues in the prosecution that she contaminated another bag that was used after she had finished her shift. But," and then the second tweet says, "if he's saying that bags can be contaminated in advance, why does it matter who was on shift when the alleged poisoning started? That doesn't seem logical to me." And that's the end of the tweet, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I mean, Myers did say, well, if it was Lucy, she would have had to have the gift of foresight. But he didn't make the argument that's being made here, that if the prosecution's bringing in the principle, which is what they did, and this is what Angela's saying, of contaminating these TPN bags in advance, well, we have no idea to what degree in advance they were contaminated then, do we? And we don't know when that happened, so we don't know who was on shift when that happened. And so, as other people have said in other tweets, well, they're believing all the other staff to say that they didn't do it, so why would they not believe Lucy Letby that she didn't do it? Now, this is putting aside the fact that there's no proof there was anything added to the TPN bags anyway, and be that as it may, that's a whole separate raft of argument. But here it's in relation to why did they focus on Lucy Letby for those? Because they're using the argument, as Angela brilliantly puts it here, that the prosecution is saying that she contaminated one in advance because one of the bags either ran out, or I think the bag tissued, I think that was the term that's used, which is apparently not a correct term to use, but they had to change the bag basically and get another bag out, which was allegedly then also contaminated by Lucy Letby with no proof whatsoever, because she'd done it in advance. But if they don't know when that advance was, how do we know that Lucy Letby was on shift when that was meant to have happened? Because we don't know when that happened. And going back to the other aspect is that there's no proof whatsoever that it's much more likely to be that they're completely false tests for a whole raft of reasons, false sort of positives, as it were, and the test completely unreliable in relation to exogenous or synthetic insulin. But this is just to attack the prosecution's argument about that it had to be Lucy Letby, because they're saying, well, I just think it's brilliant, these two tweets by Angela. I haven't seen it from last year, over a year ago, until today, this very argument. Well, and it's different to what Myers said in the court, because he's saying, well, you're saying that she knew which one they were going to pick when she went off duty. So Lucy goes off duty, and Myers said, well, you're saying that she knew which one they were going to pick. How is that believable? But it's much worse. It's much worse than that. As Angela's bringing onto the table here, if the principle is here that things can be done in advance, well, then we don't know when they were done in advance, and it doesn't matter who was on shift for any particular crash, as it were, or change in the what's the word? I can't think of all the medical terms off the top of my head now. Change in the baby's status when its blood sugar was very low. That was on the medical records. What's that called? I can't remember the name. I can't remember the terms. I've got so many terms in my head, I just can't remember them. But the principle, the point is that was then they get this test result later down the line, which is completely unreliable for synthetic insulin anyway. But it's the crucial point Angela's making here is it's the prosecution, it's the CPS, it's the police advocating the fact that, oh yeah, Lucy did it in advance. Well, they don't know who did it in advance, because if something's done in advance, how do we know that all the bags weren't done in advance then? By whomsoever, whensoever, nobody knows. That should have been cut to pieces by the defence. What Angela's done here in these tweets, I've not seen anywhere else argued until I've seen these tweets, and I've been looking at everything for the last 13 months. And it's different to the Myers argument. Yeah, so that's I couldn't remember those medical terms. There's the hyper and the hypo low, hyper's high, but whatever the term is, it went into a state of hypo, a very low sugar, which they then thought was because of this exogenous insulin being added. But as we keep saying, that was never proven anyway. The bags were never tested. The tests are unreliable. There's a whole raft of reasons why those tests could have thrown up those figures, and they're not reliable. And you've got this issue of the third so-called insulin case that Evans says, the third baby, the Alder Hay says is the baby suffering from hyperinsulinism. So there's that aspect to it. You've got this another aspect that the body produces this thing called pro-insulin, and it's that might have skewed that test. There's so many things that could be wrong with the test itself. But this is a principle of argument here in terms of, well, if you're telling us things can be done in advance when we don't know, and you're trying to match it up to a staff rota and saying when it happened and who was on duty, well, all that goes out the window as soon as you say something can be done in advance. Well, it could have been done a week ago then, couldn't it? Could have been done a week ago. Or could it have been done 4 days, 5 days, 3 days ago when Lucy wasn't on duty? So I just think that was a remarkable argument there by Angela. I'll copy and paste what she said there. Hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her, and but it's a public tweet, so, but I just think it's a absolutely brilliant argument. Hope I've done it justice by talking about it. It's just a real light bulb thing, absolutely extraordinary. Anyway, I'll leave it there and won't ramble anymore. And that's it. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Cheers.